His favorite Shri Rupa Manjari. Shri Rupa Manjari Padam Se Mora Sampadam Shri Rupa Manjari Padam Se Mora Sampadam Se Mor Bhajana Pujana Se Mora Pranadhana Se Mora Abharana Se Mora Jivanera Jivana Se Mora Rasanidhi Se Mora Vancha Siddhi Se Mora Vedhera Dharama Se Vrata Se Tapa Se Mora Mantra Japa Se Mora Dharma Karama Anukula Habe Vidhi Se Pade Hoi Besidhi Nirakiba e due noyane Nirakiba e due noyane Se Rupa Madhuri Rashi Prana Kuvalaya Sashi Prafulita Benishi Dine Prafulita Benishi Dine तुआ दर्शन अहि गरले जरल देही चिरादिन तापित जीवन हाहा रूप करो दया देह मोरे पद छाया नरोत्तम लैल शरण नरोत्तम लैल शरण श्री रूप मंजरी पद से मोर संपद श्री रूप मंजरी पद से मोर संपद ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। नमः ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Niti Namine Sri Varshabhanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayine Prabhave Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddhapa Siddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhumestvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathayate Namaha Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So we are not having a verse today since the appearance of Saraswati Thakur. So we would be discussing something from his life and teachings. There's actually so much, about such personalities, what they have achieved in their life and contribution. It's kind of overwhelming to think about, even where to begin and how to, speak something about this. So I would like to speak in 4 parts. This is basically based on one of our Prabhupada followers who has written a very scholarly book summarizing his life and contributions. He talks about his entire contribution in 4 parts. One is the context in which he appeared, as in, because every personality, when they appear in this world, whether it is Supreme Lord or his great associates, there is a particular social situation at that time. And several of the response that these personalities have is also based on that, right? Like we know when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, what was the situation, right? If you read Chaitanya Bhagavat or Chaitanya Charitamrita, it spends a lot of time talking about the background of Navadvip, how the social structure was at that time, what were people's aspirations and so on. And then it talks about Mahaprabhu coming over there. Okay, so it's always like that. It's because this world is such that even whether it is Supreme Lord or his great devotees, when they appear, there is a particular social environment in which they come. So obviously we need to understand that. So we will spend some time on that as the first point. The second thing we would speak is his life and his life, basically, the way it moved, and certain very important turning points in his life. That is how this author has presented in his book. So I'm going to repeat from that. That is the second part of our presentation. Third is, his aspiration or his desire or vision of why we need to preach in the West. So that's again a separate topic in itself, because it was that legacy that Srila Prabhupada picked up and went ahead. So without touching that, we cannot complete any description of Saraswati Thakur. And finally, we would be touching upon certain very unique contributions he had. So everyone, when they come to this world, these great personalities, they have so many unique contributions, very, very specific. So with Saraswati Thakur, there are so many of them, but even the language that we use, right? Certain specific, like personality of Godhead, Supreme Personality of Godhead, which Srila Prabhupada used for Krishna. This is basically coming from his writings. Or so many things like that. Bhajananandi, Goshtyanandi, Melo for Rasa, Nirvishesha. You know what, in a Pranam Mantra we say Nirvishesha. Actually, because the Mayavadis use the term Saguna Nirguna. So why did he go to Nirvishesha, Savishesha? So many things. In terms of language, his contribution is phenomenal. Certain terms that we use these days, they are all coming from Saraswati Thakur only. So in this way, we'll try to, do it in 4 parts. So I wish to start with the first part, which is the era in which he appeared. Okay, so we all know that he appeared in the year 1874. As per the English calendar, it was 6th of February 1874 that he appeared in this world as the 7th child of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his good wife Bhagavati Devi. So that is his appearance time, day and this thing, Tithi, which we are observing today. But more importantly, we need to see the social context of Bengal. So at that particular time, as we know, India was firmly under the grip of foreign rule. British Raj was ruling over India. And Bengal was obviously the first place where the East India Company had come and set up their headquarters and so on. So there were certain responses by the affluent upper middle class of Bengal. So in any textbook you will see the sophisticated people of Bengal are addressed as Bhadraloka. That is the term that is used to describe all of them together as a group. And we need to understand that even Kedarnath Datta, that is Bhaktivinoda Thakur, father of Srila Saraswati Thakur, he was also from that same Bhadraloka background. Okay, so what is this Bhadraloka essentially? Bhadraloka is basically the middle class or the sophisticated people of Bengal who subscribed a lot to the liberal and secular values. And they emphasized a lot on modern education and to get some good job and be settled in life. And they had a lot of appreciation for British culture, taste, talent, etc. So this is a 2-line description of Bhadraloka. Okay, now the question is, and they had a certain philosophical orientation. So before going to that, we need to understand why it was like that. So it is said that at that particular time, from a religious perspective, the British who had come, they had several strong criticisms about Hindu culture in general and specifically about Gaudiya Vaishnavism as well. One thing is the British and their missionaries, they had a lot of disdain for the worship of what they would call as idols, what we call as deities. So they felt that this is just, idol worship, superstitious and all that. So this was one very strong attack that these people were doing, the missionaries as well as the British government itself, So this was something that they always had in mind, that these people are all indulging in all this. This is the first thing. Second thing is, the British also had a lot of, at least they say that they had a lot of respect for rationalism and so on. And hence, emotions which were there in worship, they looked down upon that as something very third class. So now you need to understand that at that point of time in Bengal, for all practical purposes, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism was primarily limited to the lower class of Bengal and who were extremely sentimental in their worship. As in, very, very sentimental and, right? So that's why this whole Appa Sampradaya stuff, right? So that's why if you see in his Pranati also, that mention is there, Appa Sampradayas. Because these Appa Sampradayas that had come up, and most of them were Sahajiya type, taking things very cheaply, pretending as if you have got love of God. Shri Radha Damchandra Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Gaunita ki jai, Jagannath Baldev Subhadra ki jai. So please try to understand that this was the common flavor of Vaishnavism that was around at that time when he appeared, right? Before he appeared. So, and these people were very, very sentimental in their worship, trying to show that they have got love of God prematurely when absolutely nothing was there, right? So this was the situation, right? And the British were strongly against it, saying that because they said that we stand for rationalism and intellectual thought. And look at these people here, they are worshipping God in such a sentimental fashion, showing emotions which are actually false, pretending to be something which they are not, and so on. So these were the allegations that were there at that time. Okay, this is the second thing. And their third, the British, their third strong objection to Vaishnavism and everything was Radha Krishna pastimes, which were seen as, or Krishna and the gopis, etc., which were seen as a type of sexual deviant behavior from their perspective. This was also because the way our people had presented it, because as I told you, there weren't too many sophisticated people who had taken up Vaishnavism at that time, at least in Bengal in the 19th century. Most of the people were illiterate, uneducated, and they would not even have strict moral lives personally. Their personal lives were all extremely immoral in several acts, but then they would speak about all these pastimes of Krishna and the gopis in a very sensual manner. So when the British and all would hear that this is how it's going on here, they would say that what is this? This is utter, they had utter contempt. Okay, so this was the response of the British. Three things. They had a problem with the deity worship. They had a problem with the emotional sentimentalism of so many Vaishnavas, which was unfortunately the case. And they also had a problem with Krishna Gopi pastimes, which are narrated, unfortunately, in a very cheap, sensual manner. Okay. Now, as a result of this, what happened was, now this was the British acquisition. As a result of this, what happened, in Bengal, the intellectuals who were there, this Bhadraloka, which I just defined, what they started doing is, they started taking a particular approach. Okay. Their approach was, first of all, they started leaning more towards Advaita. Okay. Because Advaita, the advantage they saw was, it seemed more rational, intellectual. You get it? It wasn't sentimental or anything. It was more rational, intellectual kind of type. And it obviously did not have so much of deity worship as a part of it, because the focus was philosophy and all this stuff. So they started leaning more towards Advaita. And they also started leaning towards, they took up, this Islamic idea of being against deity worship. Because the thing is, in the broader Sanatana Dharma system, in Advaita Sampradaya, deity worship, though they may be using it as a tool, it was not very prominent. It was not a most important thing, right? So then they went against it also, deity worship also. They said that, see, the Bhadraloka, that entire population, they said that, see, we stand for intellectualism, we stand for Upanishadic thought process and so on. So this is how they started describing the Indian scriptures to them. See, because you have to appreciate that these people who were there, they also had an affection to Sanatana Dharma, but they couldn't handle the attacks that were there from the other side. And they couldn't justify what the sentimental people were doing also. You get it? So they were stuck. So on one hand, obviously, they didn't want to get converted and give up their religion because that identity was there somehow, right? I mean, they had that affection from family and whatever. So they started leaning more towards going against deity worship, speaking about Advaita and talking about national aspirations and so on. So this is how that whole freedom struggle and, those freedom fighters and all started coming out of Bengal. Now, why you need to appreciate this context is, it is in this context that Saraswati Thakur appeared. Okay. When you look at it like that, then you can understand the way he did some things later in life, the way he responded, how he accommodated the aspirations, the thought process of this Bhadraloka as well, and how he effectively counteracted the British accusations, and how he effectively dealt with all these apasampradayas and these sentimental people. So there were three groups which were there. There was the British, the sentimental crowd, and this Bhadraloka. And in this era, you have a Vaishnava, who has come up, and now he has to defend or showcase, what is Gaudiya Vaishnava thought. So please try to appreciate it, So then only you get it as to why they did certain things, why they, So, I mean, everything is connected. We will go into it. So when we start going into his life. So this is the first part of what I wanted to say, the context in which he appears. Okay, good. Now we will directly go a little bit into his life, which I will try to keep it brief because I want to focus on the other parts as well. So as I said, he was born as the 7th child of Kedarnath Datta and Bhagavati Devi. It is said that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 14 children, and the 7th one was Bimala Prasad, who was born in 1874, and he named him Bimala Prasad because there was Bimala Devi, who is the female potency of Lord Jagannath. He had petitioned her for a child who is going to help in preaching and establishing the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So because of which he named the child born in her honor, this female potency of Jagannath, Bimala Devi. That is why that particular name was given. So you also need to appreciate that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, it's very interesting if you see in his life also, which I am not going to go into, but speaking very briefly, he had a lot of struggle in his life. His life is such a struggle, right? Throughout, health struggle, his job, everything was a struggle. Family, because he was born in a Shakta family primarily, okay? But in his childhood, there was cholera epidemic. All his brothers, sisters, except one sister, he lost all his siblings. Entire family was wiped out. They lost all their wealth. Utter poverty. They literally landed in poverty, because of which he was giving so many examinations, this, that. And finally, at the age of 27, he became a deputy magistrate of 7th grade. So that is where he started. This was from material perspective. From the spiritual perspective also, a lot of struggle if you see. That means he had this great desire to understand the truth. But there was just no facility only for him, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Okay, in fact, it is said, this biography, it says that in his younger youth, he had also joined a Christian congregation to learn about God. Can you imagine? I mean, it's from that much amount of struggle these people did to understand something. I mean, if you see their lives, so much of struggle for everything. To get a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it took 7 years for him. So, and that also, he had to really struggle a lot for that. So it is said that was a turning point in his life when he read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He says that he read it 3 times, over and over again. And it is the 3rd time that he became very convinced of Mahaprabhu's mission as the highest. And how, one has to commit to that. And that is why Saraswati Thakur also had a lot of affection for Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm just mentioning the point here, in case I forget. He would say that every devotee must read Chaitanya Charitamrita at least 108 times in his life. And it is said that he read it. He actually read it 108 times. So he said that every Gaudiya Vaishnava should do that, should read it 108 times at least. So, because both father and son had that kind of attachment for Lord Chaitanya. I'm just fast forwarding a little bit because I'm not even sure whether I will exactly cover what I wanted to. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, when he sent his disciples to West to preach, he wanted to showcase mainly Lord Chaitanya and his teachings to the West. It's very interesting if you look at it. It was not so much Krishna that he was, of course, at one level you cannot differentiate the two, but more specifically it was Lord Chaitanya and his teachings that he wanted to introduce to the West. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So that was his, that was the father and son, their attachment to Mahaprabhu and his teachings, right? So going back in the story, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had so much of struggle to even obtain the right copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And when he did, he took it with, complete conviction. Okay. Now, by the time Saraswati Thakur was born, he was established. Now, please try to understand that. All his struggles were actually over, his father. his career was well set. He was in Puri as a deputy magistrate. Materially, things were set. Spiritually, also, he had great clarity now that this is the path and he wants to follow this path. Are you getting it? All the struggles with Bhaktivinoda Tagore underwent in his life, that all had sorted by the time this seventh child was born to them. Okay, he was very, very clear about what he wants to do in life. So Saraswati Thakur had that great fortune of being born in a situation where materially also things were very affluent. It is said that his father sponsored his education. He supported him like anything till the end, whether it is financially, emotionally, taking care of his health, giving him instructions. If you see that, till the time he passed away, even 2 weeks before he passed away, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had written a letter to Saraswati Thakur, giving him certain instructions to do certain things in life. So, Saraswati Thakur had that great fortune of, at least from that perspective, not having any big struggle. Whether it was financially just to maintain himself, of course, he never had a family. But even otherwise, everything was taken care. Even the first job that he got, Saraswati Thakur, everything was done by Bhaktivinoda Thakur only. He had only recommended him work under the Maharaj of Tripura. So he had sent him over there because he had so many contacts as a deputy magistrate. So I'm just saying that his life, at least from that perspective, was smoother than his father, who had phenomenal struggles, in that particular era. Okay. Now coming back to the story again. So it is said that when he was 7 years, he had entire Bhagavad Gita by heart, Saraswati Thakur. Entire Bhagavad Gita, all 700 verses were by heart. And not only by heart, he says here that he could explain them as well, as per Vaishnava thought process. He had that capacity. And then when he was 7 years old, it is said at that time that his father gave him a japamala, which he used throughout his life. And he also, during the excavation of Bhakti Bhavan, he found a deity of Kurmadev, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And that Kurmadev also, the deity, he gave it to his son. Please remember, his son was 7-year-old at that time. This was all in the year 1881, when Saraswati Thakur was just 7-year-old. Okay, so he had Bhagavad Gita by heart, he had a mala, and also he was initiated into the worship of Kurmadev. That means it says here that his father had taught him the proper rituals of how to worship the deity. And he had, given him that responsibility. So this was all when he was 7-year-old. Okay. And his life also in his childhood, it is said that Saraswati Thakur, due to his father's contacts, he met so many famous people in Bengal because everybody would come. So for example, here he says that Rabindranath Tagore had come when Saraswati Thakur was just 7-year-old to meet Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur told him that, why don't you sing a song about Radha and Krishna? So it says Rabindranath Tagore, he sang a song, and Saraswati Thakur later he writes that personally he never had so much inclination towards music and sweet singing, etc. You will see that in his biography. It is said that whenever somebody would insist that a sweet singer only should sing kirtan, Saraswati Thakur would take a strong objection actually. He would say, what is this? You are behind that sweetness of the music or behind the holy name? So he personally wouldn't look at that as a parameter, for someone to sing kirtan, etc. It's very amazing if you read the personal tastes that he had in his life, right? But he says later that when this Rabindranath Tagore came and sang Radha Krishna, I really appreciated his expression and language. So he writes that in his, so there is a autobiography kind of his called Saraswati Jayashri, which is a collection of various letters and things that Saraswati Thakur wrote to his disciples later about his childhood and various events. And in that, mention of this also comes. Okay. And of course, we know the mango story as well. There are just 2 versions of the story. One version is that he ate that mango at the age of 4. But another version, which this author has given here based on Saraswati Jayashri, says he was 20 years at that time. When somehow he ended up eating that mango which wasn't offered, due to which Bhaktivinoda Thakur mildly told him that you should never do this. And he took a vow of not eating a mango all his life, okay, which he followed. But it is also mentioned that he would, his favorite was mango chutney, which he would eat. This kacha aam ki chutney. So that he would take. But what he would not take is the ripe mango, because that was what he had, so to speak, offended from his perspective, because he had taken it without offering. So that is also mentioned here, right? Now, so obviously very, very scholarly from his childhood. I mean, if you see the scholarly nature of Saraswati Thakur, it is just astounding in terms of the amount of literature he brought out and also the amount of literature he read in his life. It's just mind boggling. How can a person do that? And the amount of commentaries he wrote also. And he did it along with so many other things, right? Like for example, when he did this Shatakoti Nama Japa, that 1 billion names chanting between 1905 to 1914, 9 years he took for that. At that time, he wrote the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita also, the Anubhasya. If you read Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita, many times he writes from that in Anubhasya, like that. At least hundreds of times Prabhupada writes in his Chaitanya Charitamrita. In Anubhasya commentary, Srila Saraswati Thakur says, and he writes what he says. Okay, like especially I remember this Chota Haridas incident and so many other important incidents in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada's commentary, a lot comes from Saraswati Thakur's commentary. So all this, so his scholarly nature was astounding. And it is said that he would not speak so much on Leela in his classes. It was very less. It was mostly Tattva only, which he would speak. Okay, Tattva he would speak. And the language also, if you see the English, in fact, there are so many in all these biographies, the British, when they would come and hear him, and they were interviewed later, what did you hear? They would say exactly what Saraswati Thakur said. And if you see those paragraphs, you have to literally sit with a dictionary and you have to read very slowly to understand what he's saying. Because he had that amazing scholarly ability from his childhood. Okay, so because of that, it is said that so in his childhood he had a lot of interest in astronomy. Okay, and he was an expert at it. Not only was an expert in astronomy, he also so that's why he got the name Siddhanta Saraswati. So if you see this title now, which is the Siddhanta Saraswati, this was awarded when he was 15-year-old in 1889, and it was awarded by his teachers Mahesh Chandra Chodamani and Sundar Lal. They were big pandits in Calcutta, and they had awarded this title to him as Siddhanta Saraswati. And much later in 1905, when he started the Shatakoti Nama Japa, Bhaktivinoda Thakur added Bhakti in front of that Siddhanta Saraswati. And that is how, this entire name, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, it came up, right? So he had this proficiency in astronomy. And it is said throughout his life, he would always travel wherever he had to travel looking at astronomy. That means he would look at astrology, suitable times to travel. It is said that part he obeyed all his life because he himself was a scholar. So he did not depend on anyone to tell him which is the auspicious time to go and all that. So he himself knew that very well, but he followed that throughout his life. Okay. Another interesting thing, it is said that he entered a college, at the age of 15, 16, he passed a particular entrance exam and he joined a college. But it is said when he joined that college in 1888 or 1880, in 1895. So by this time he was 21-year-old. So it is said that he studied in that college for a long time because he was very good at it. But it is said that he was so good at that subject that he would have a lot of free time in college. And it is at that time that his favorite hobby at the age of 18 to 20 was reading Narottam Das Thakur's songs from Prarthana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika. It is said these were his favorite books, which he would always read from the songs, and he would keep singing that in his free time because he had a lot of free time. It is said that because he covered his academics pretty quickly. He took Sanskrit and mathematics in his college. But another interesting thing is he left the college without completing the degree because of a difference of opinion with the head of that college, headmaster. So that is also very interesting, and this illustrates a character in his life. So to tell you, this Surya Siddhanta is the text which is there in India which talks on astronomy. Now, I'll not go into that so much, but please try to understand that astronomy, Indian astronomy is such that the astronomy, according to the tradition itself, time to time, you need to revise the calculations to bring things in order with what is seen. Okay, so please try to understand. Surya Siddhanta is a very ancient text which is almost 3,000 years old, which we know. I mean, From our perspective, it is eternal only, but I'm saying from an academic perspective. The earliest known version is some 3000 years old. Uske pehle ka hi rahega kabhi to. Right. So the thing is, these calculations are such that traditionally they were had to do some recalculation to bring it in line with modern pratyaksha. So please try to understand. Our shastra which is there, though it is Shabda Pramana, this type of material sciences, I would call it, they also involve pratyaksha in it. Okay, so it is not like Bhagavatam is there. No, Bhagavatam is pure Shabda Pramana, right? You don't have to change the Bhagavatam with time. Because it is Shabda Pramana, there is nothing to change. Now that Prahlad story is Prahlad story only. Right? Dhruva Maharaj's story is that. But these scriptures are not like that. Ayurveda, this, etc. This also involves pratyaksha, what you actually see around. And then you have to do some fine tuning. So it is said that for almost 8 centuries, no major update was done in this particular science. So Saraswati Thakur insisted that we need to relook at the calculations to increase the prestige of the Surya Siddhanta to bring it in line with modern calculations and measurements. But unfortunately, it is said that the principal and so many others of that college, they insisted on sticking to the old things only. They said that, nahi, jo likha hua hai, wahi hum karenge. Even if whatever we see or whatever doesn't align with it, we don't care about that. Now, please try. So on this disagreement, he quit the college because he had that principle that if I don't agree, I'll not sit here. No, I don't agree with you and you are the headmaster. So forget it. I'm leaving and going. But despite that, please remember the academicians of that area had so much respect for him that they offered him a permanent chair in Calcutta University on astronomy. That means it's like a head of department post for the astronomy studies. He was offered that without any degree because other academicians and scholars knew that this person is outstanding. Now, this example of Saraswati Thakur's conflict with this headmaster, this is not a unique thing, please remember. Okay. He always had this in every area of his contribution. He felt that if some old system is not working, we need to revise it, re-look at it and bring it in alignment with modern systems. Okay, that's why in his very famous book called Upakhyana Upadesh, he writes that story. It's one of my favorite stories. The story of this Brahmin who had an ancestral well. So there was a Brahmin. In his house, there was an ancestral well. And generations ago, people were all drinking water from that well in that family and they were all healthy and nice. But over a period of time, the water in that well started getting contaminated. Okay, but this Brahmin was insisting कि यही well है जिसमें हमारे पूर्वजों ने पानी पिया, so my family members should drink only from this. And it is said that all his family members started getting sick, some of them started dying, and all the other villagers were scolding, hey, what useless fellow, how you're killing all your family by having them drink this water. He said, no, this is the water my forefathers have drunk water from. I'm not going to change this or allow anybody to touch it. And it is said eventually his entire family died also by waterborne diseases by drinking the contaminated water of that well. But he was still insisting, yehi well hai. And then finally one day the corporation got upset and they sent a team and they broke the well and, despite that Brahmin's objections, and they finished off that entire system. This story, he says, for everything in life. So just like this Saraswati, this Surya Siddhanta incident I mentioned, the conflict he had with the headmaster, similarly even with Vaishnavism. He felt that if an old system isn't working, you have to change it. That is why when he took sannyas, that's why his sannyas is also a big turning point. Because please try to understand, at that time in Bengal, there were only 3 types of Vaishnavas, he says. Saraswati Thakur writes. One is the large number was the lower class, nauseatingly sentimental. Nauseatingly sentimental, मतलब देख के लगता है कि बाप रे इतना sentimental भी हो सकता है क्या बंदा. Who had no regulations in life, who may be carrying a bead bag in hand and fish in another and walking through Bengal streets and pretending to be in love of God, Radha Rani ka bhav aa gaya, Mahaprabhu aa gaya, matlab ye sab dance karna, Gauraganagiri, all. So this was this was the majority scene, thing. This was one big group. Second group was the Babajis, genuine Babajis, who were so scarce, like Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhagavad Das Babaji, many of these names are there. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, they were completely otherworldly. Otherworldly मतलब उनको देख के आपको लगेगा भी नहीं कि इनका दुनिया के साथ कुछ संबंध है.
They were like completely out of the world. Like Gaur Kishore Babaji, if you read how he lived, oh my God, it's completely otherworldly. I mean, right? I'm honestly saying, even most of us, even right now, if you would come across such a person, we would be shocked beyond all our senses, right? Because our acharyas have told us we are able to understand. Otherwise, we have no way of understanding. I mean, common, you cannot. He would sleep under a boat at night. He would wear a cloth which was burnt bodies. होता था ना उसका जो कपड़ा था, he would take that and wear. Most of the time, he would beg rice, soak it in Ganga water, and just eat like that. Otherwise, some rarely he would cook. So he would take discarded pots from the Ganga, take the firewood of this smashan, which had not fully burnt, use that for the pot and cook and honor that prasad. And for chanting, he would most of the time prefer that latrine which was there and which was extremely dirty by whatever standards. Even today, I'm sure none of us would dare to, enter a public toilet in rural Navadvip side. I mean, we just by thinking about it, we can just imagine how it would be inside. We just shocked beyond our means. We wouldn't just dare step in. But that's the way he would sit and chant, because he said that nobody comes here, so it's a fantastic place, no disturbance. No materialistic person comes. So this was the second group of Vaishnavas, completely otherworldly, who were perfect, but the world couldn't connect to them. And the third category, he says, were the caste Goswamis. Now this you have to understand, caste Goswamis means they were this Jati Goswami, hereditary lines who were coming in Bengal, who claimed proprietary or superiority rights. Most of them were Brahmins by birth. And some of their ancestor may have been a direct disciple of some Jiva Goswami, Narottam Das Thakur, like that. But they said that we have the divine rights to initiate, and only we can initiate, nobody else can. So they had, they had power and influence over all the who's who of Calcutta, Bengal. That means if you see some Maharaj of Tripura, the Maharaj of Kashim Bazar, all these people, if you see, they were connected to some caste Goswami. Because that Maharaja's great-great-grandfather was an initiated disciple of the great-great-great-grandfather of this caste Goswami. So family se aa raha tha wo. So they were completely under their grip. And they would tell them that, see, this is what you should do. And when people like Saraswati Thakur would come, who were out of that establishment, they were guarded. The caste Goswamis were guarded, saying that isko andar lene ka nahi. Because they knew that he will ruin their business, quote unquote. So these were the three groups of Vaishnavas who were present in Bengal. So this story that I said now, Upakyan Upadesh, Saraswati Thakur, he felt that just like he told his headmaster about this Surya Siddhanta text which needs updation, he felt even this needs updation. Yeah, aisa nahi chal sakta. Gaudiya Vaishnavism cannot run like this. All these three categories are, you cannot connect to them. That's why the Bhadralok said they preferred Advaitavad. ये सब देख के उनको लगा यही अच्छा है, because this is just philosophical and it is connected to our culture also. And we can talk rational stuff, which everybody in the British will also accept, all the top class people will accept it. And in this way, everything will be nice. So, so you have the point, right? So Saraswati Thakur felt, so that's why in that context, you should see the story of Upakyan Upadesh. Even Varnashram, he felt that, see, if something is not working, you need to change that system. You cannot, by the way, he was a very strong proponent of Varnashram. So that is there in his biography. Very strong. He was very clear that this Varnashram has to be established. Absolutely, he had no doubts about that aspect of life. But he felt that it needs to be, so he is considered as a reformer and a reviver of culture. Mainly a reviver, it is said, who revives things. And in that context, you have to see his opposition to his headmaster. I'm coming back to that story because that's where I am, right? So he left the college only. Then after he left the college, it is said what happened, he had to do something. So he was teaching students to prepare for the entrance exam to enter that college. He became like we say IIT JEE entrance exam teacher. So like that he was. He was teaching students to enter that college. But then what happened, all the students who were learning under him, when they would go to give the entrance exam, they would do all calculations as per his teachings, which was not in line with the university teaching. So again, those university professors came. They said that, see, you are teaching your students like this they are writing. We will not pass them. They will not get entrance. You are responsible for this. He had debates. And it said one debate, there was one big scholar, it was a very public debate. They said it was the last debate that he did. So by the way, after this debate also, he stopped teaching. He said, okay, I'll not teach anyone. If that. See, one thing about Saraswati Thakur, which I was just comparing with our Srila Prabhupada, one speciality of Srila Prabhupada, which I felt while reading this story is, Prabhupada was a fighter. Fighter means, if somebody would confront him, Prabhupada would not give up. वो उसको मार के छोड़ देते literally. Whether you see in that New York, that story of that Mr. Price or whatever, who tried to cheat, or this Nair story, if you read Giriraj Maharaj's book. I mean, Saraswati Thakur was not that type of a fighter. He was a very intellectual fighter. Intellectually, he would fight, but he was not like a street fighter, you say, na? That means opposition jitna bolega na, utna mein aur, I'm going to beat him a little bit more. That Prabhupada had that, but Saraswati Thakur did not. You will see that in many places. This Kashim Bazar Maharaj had called him for one big conference, 4-day conference was there, where they had this in 1912. There was a debate about Vaishnavism. So all these caste Goswamis who had come, they ensured that इनको हम chance ही नहीं देंगे बात करने को. Because उसके पहले वो दूसरा वाला conference हुआ था 1911 में, that Brahmin Vaishnav conference. Unfortunately, I'm not going into all the details, but at the Brahmin Vaishnav conference, Saraswati Thakur was given a prominent place. 3 lectures he gave. And there he gave such a talk that, it was, even though all these Pandits did not like whatever he said, because he glorified Brahmana, he glorified Vaishnava, and then he said, who is a real Brahmana? So the way he presented, initially many of these Brahmins felt he's on their side only. Right? But then later they slowly started understanding, no, he's talking something else. He's actually attacking our position. So in the next year, what happened, 1912, they said, and that 1911 conference, he was so famous, it is said that the huge crowd which was there, everybody wanted the dust of his lotus feet. So the police and all, they said that, okay, they made a system. Police matlab wo system banate na. So they said that they got 3-4 buckets of water. They said, you have to put your feet inside. Sabko pani dena padega, to mara-mari ho jayega yahan par. So, they literally forced him to put his lotus feet into bucket. He had no choice. I mean, they just, police matlab, they do it their way, right? I mean, we know how police or administrator thinks from it. He's just thinking how to have the crowds properly oriented. So after that, these caste communities were very guarded. So in the Kashim Bazar conference, what happened in 1912, they said that isko chance hi nahi denge baat karne ko. We will not give him chance to speak. So that's what they did. So what Saraswati Thakur did, 4 days he fasted. He didn't eat anything. He said that if I cannot speak Harikatha in a place, I am not going to eat. And he had such principles. Oh my God, it's like, I mean, in everything. I mean, much later in life, one of his disciples, he went somewhere to beg, to get some donation. So he got a very good donation. He came back and told Saraswati Thakur, bahut acha donation mila. And then he asked that, what did you speak to that family? He said that I glorified. That lady is a very nice lady. I said, you're just like Lakshmi Devi. I glorified her. Saraswati Thakur got so upset. He said, what is this nonsense? You went to their house and you glorified that woman as Lakshmi Devi and you got this money. I don't want this money only. Because you can't simply glorify anybody like that. So he stood a lot for his principles in life. That's another thing you will see in his story. Very staunch on principle. No compromise on that ever. Whatever he felt. So yeah, coming back to what I was saying, that he was not such a fighter, as in, if something would happen like this, where the opposite party was attacking him and cornering him, he would withdraw. Saraswati Thakur, he was an intellectual type person, he would withdraw. So 4 days he fasted in Kashim Bazar. He just came back, and then much later that Maharaj of Kashim Bazar came to understand, Hare, such a great person came to my house, 4 days he was fasting. He came and apologized and, he gave some donation. He tried to pacify that relationship. Because he was a genuine person only, but unfortunately he was under the grip of all these, powerful people. So, I just contrasted it with Prabhupada, because if you see Prabhupada, his ability to fight against people who went against him was phenomenal. He would not give up only. I mean, I'm just sorry deviating from the story, but if you read that Nair story, I would say that no normal human being will say that I will fight this much. You will say that, okay, withdraw karenge. Itna hai to nahi karna hai humko. People withdraw easily. Prabhupada was not like that. He said that, and I mean, that's a different story. I'll not go to that. But anyway, that was just a comparison. Okay, coming back here. So, so in 1895, what happened is, so he left this whole teaching only, astronomy. So it is said that is the time he left. Okay, his last debate was with one very powerful scholar. His name is there, one Bengali elderly scholar on astronomy. And it said that he defeated him. ऐसा defeat कर दिया कि that person passed urine and stool in the place itself out of being ashamed of being defeated by this 20-year-old youth. He was just 21-year-old, right? He was so powerful with his debating skills. So that person involuntarily सब निकल गया उसका. He was like, he couldn't handle that defeat from Siddhartha Saraswati. He just, he was like very badly defeated. Anyway, but it said that was his last engagement. After that, he just gave up this entire field completely. I mean, he was personally practicing in terms of looking at auspicious time to travel, but he was not preaching this thing. Okay. But then in 1895, his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, what he did is, we have this 9, 10? 9, 10, no? Okay, 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah, but 9:15 is okay, or what is it like? There was one picture put up earlier. I forgot. I was seeing that only. I said, okay, but okay, 9:15 we'll let. Okay, just 10 more minutes. Nothing, I mean. So, yeah, coming back to the story. So he worked under the Maharaj of Tripura for 10 years. He was teaching Sanskrit to their children. He was, doing some service there. So there he worked for 10 years. But then it is said that he was not very happy. He gave up that task. By 1905, he gave it up completely. But that Maharaj was also very happy with his service. So he gave him a lifelong pension. He said, I'll give you. 3 years he took it. But in 1908, he said that I can't take money like this. Because he had identified that he wants to take a sannyasi role. And he said, as a sannyasi, I should just beg and live on Krishna's mercy rather than living on pension of a government. So he said, I cannot, it goes against my principle. Again, principle comes in. So when he decided to go into sannyas kind of life, he said that I cannot have a salary like this from this Maharaj of Tripura, who is giving from the government so much money every month to me. So he said, I can't take this money. He gave it up. Okay, so that's one thing. One of his turning points, it is said, a very important turning point is association with his spiritual master, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. He says in his Saraswati Jayashri, Saraswati Thakur writes that had it not been for that particular meeting with Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, the interaction that he had between 1898 to 1902, he said perhaps he may have never married in life, because that he was very clear from childhood only that he doesn't want to get married. That orientation only was not there. But he said that he may have given his entire life behind Sanskrit and studies of astronomy. But it is said that the character of his Guru Maharaj, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, attracted him to the life of a mendicant. So he says that is a turning point, he says. Where that personality of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji attracted him to Vairagya, to a life of Vairagya. So he says that. Okay. Then as we know, for 10 years he did this Nama Japa vow. And when we hear this Nama Japa, we sometimes think that he was only chanting 10 years. It is not like that. If you see in the story, he achieved a lot of work in that period. He started initiating in 1906. When he was just 31-year-old, he had his first disciple. And that time his father and guru were still there. So it is obvious that he had their blessings to initiate. But he had started initiation at the age of 31 as a brahmachari. And 10 years during this Nama Japa, he was defending, he went into all these conferences to fight. He wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita commentary. He was overseeing the worship of Lord Chaitanya at Yoga Peeth. He did a lot of tasks with it. It was not that he was just chanting like that. No, it wasn't like that. Another important turning point in his life came much later when his father and guru disappeared. That was in 1914 and 15. Bhaktivinoda Thakur Gaur Kishore Babaji left just with 1 year difference. At that time, Saraswati Thakur, it is said, he felt very lonely. It's a very touching story if you read it. He feels that I have nobody with me now, because my father and guru both left. Within 1 year only both left. Both were very powerful. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was very strict with his son as well. You see that. Even during his Chaturmas vow, Saraswati Thakur would take very strong vow, eating only once by bending down. There is some vow like that. Only keep your hands behind and you bend down, and whatever can come in your mouth in one go, that is the food for you in the day. So he was following this type of vow and all. Saraswati Bhaktivinoda Thakur told him that you should not follow like this vows. It is not good for your health. And then he would listen also to his father. So it is said that, see, like everyone, even great people, sometimes they need someone a little above them to, give some small corrections or whatever like this. Because nobody can tell him, right? Who can tell Saraswati Thakur not to follow vow? Only his father can say. And his father would say properly. And Gauru Prasad Babaji would say. He also gave him many instructions. He told him never go to Calcutta in life. Later he said that when he was asked, Hare, you came to Calcutta to do Gaudiya Math and all. He said, I never came to Calcutta. I came to Gaudiya Math. This is a transcendental Vaikuntha place. I never visited Calcutta only. I mean, he had, so he was very clear. He followed his guru's words, but, and he was very serious about it. He was not saying that as a joke or something. He was very serious. No, I really followed his instruction. He told me don't go to Calcutta. I never went to Calcutta. Calcutta is the city of materialists. I never came there. I only came to the temple of Radha Giridhari or whatever the deity is. He said that I followed that vow. So that was also a turning point in his life where he decided. So it's at that time that this whole thought of sannyas came to him. So see this again, this sannyas again you have to see in connection with that story that I said earlier. The story of that ancestral well, which was completely corrupt. So he thought that ye jo teen log hai na, the sentimentalists, the caste Goswami, and these Vairagi Babajis, none of this is relevant in the modern world. He felt that ye relevant nahi, ye ancestral well hai, ye relevant nahi. Even Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it is said Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he took Babaji Vesh at the end of his life. But Saraswati Thakur felt like, no, my father took it, he was competent, I respected, but neither will I take, nor anybody here is competent to take it. He was very clear on that. So that is why he said, I need a system where people can. So he took the sannyas thing. And another thing you will read in the story is, he was very eager to learn and incorporate things. So it is said that these 4 Sampradaya temples that he set up now in Mayapur, I'm sure all of us have gone there, the 4 Acharyas, we see that in the Parikrama. It was not that he just set up those, deities like that. It is said that one of his lifetime missions was to set up an encyclopedia, which he called as Vaishnava Manjusha, where he wanted all the teachings of especially Madhva and Ramanuja compiled. He said that was his lifelong dream project, and which he said he invested a lot of money in it. This Maharaj of Kashim Bazar sponsored that by giving several lakhs of rupees. So they worked a lot on it. Unfortunately, he said that that work never got complete in his whole life because it was such a big work which they had started. Okay. But he writes very clearly that, his own idea about Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because he sees Mahaprabhu as someone who had taken the best from all Sampradayas. We say, he took two from all Sampradayas like that. So it was in that mood that he approached this whole thing. Even his sannyas, which is there, he took it by inspiration from Ramanuja, who had taken sannyas by himself, if you know the story. Nobody had awarded Ramanuja as sannyas. He took it by himself only. So in that mood only, he took that particular teaching. He said that I don't want to take from anyone here because either they are Babajis or they are the Caste Goswami and they will understand. So he said, sat in front of his Guru Maharaj's picture and took sannyas. That's it. And he did. Then he established this Gaudiya mission. He actually, incidentally, he actually called it the Vishwa Vaishnava Rajya Sabha. That is the name he gave. It's not very commonly known, but in all his letters and everything, it was Vishwa Vaishnava Rajya Sabha, which was actually started by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Okay, that means the worldwide society for Vaishnavas. So that is how he started in 1918. And I'll just say one or two things about, in the Gaudiya Math thing, which I liked very much, is this, he had this whole theistic exhibition concept, which he did about 6 or 7, it is said, in his lifetime. Theistic exhibition means they would rent a place 1 mile by 1 mile, open ground, 1 mile by 1 mile or something. Big place, matlab bahut bada jagah rent karte the. And they would have all the best of material things over there. Whatever the best movies, scientific invention, everything was shown. And then they would have all Sampradayas also having one stall. All the bogus Sampradayas also they would keep one stall for them. And then they would keep Gaudiya Math in the center. So his whole idea was, come to this exhibition, see everything that is going on in the universe, and then come and see what Gaudiya Math is doing. And he would keep everything in that. Matlab, in one of the theistic exhibitions in 1931, what he did, he kept one stall where he kept one, that Upadesh Upakyan story is there, Brahman Badam Bonga. That means the Shaligram Badam, that means the Brahman is sitting and he's using the Shaligram as a means to earn money. So so the story what he writes is he uses the Shaligram to break the Badam, indicating that for him Shaligram is nothing but a means to fill his belly. So he had kept one Brahmin sitting there in the stall, and with a stone, not with a real shaligram, but with a stone showing that this is shaligram, and breaking badam that he's eating. So it is said that the Brahmins, because he had shown that Brahmin with all these things, so the Brahmins were enraged. They put a case in the court saying that he's defaming us. And these Brahmins, what they did, see, they also made a very intelligent argument. They said that you can't say that only Brahmins are greedy. There are so many Vaishnavas, they are also greedy. They put a case like that in the court. Saraswati Thakur, when he came to know, he said, yes, I accept your point. So he told his disciples, put a Vaishnav tilak for that Brahmin who is eating the badam. So then these Brahmins were taken aback. Hare, how did he do that? So he said, my opposition is for the principle. It's not against the, Smartha Brahmin or anything. It is the principle. You may be wearing tilak, you may be wearing anything, but if you're doing this, I'm against that. I have nothing to do with you as an individual. So it is said these Brahmins who put the case, they took it back. They were also astounded. How did he do that? We didn't expect that, he's going to take such a step. So many things like that you see, it's just an overwhelming amount of stories and information. And I just want to end by saying that I personally feel great gratitude to these writers. One is Pranav Prabhu, whose book I was referring to today, but I really didn't go into anything. And of course, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj also, his books which are there. So because I feel that it's a wonderful meditation to read the stories of these personalities and just try to absorb and see how they did certain things. It is so purifying. It is so refreshing. It is, and if you see, they were उस stereotype में नहीं बैठ सकते. And in fact, it's very difficult for anybody to say that I've understood this person also. We cannot understand. It's like the more we read, the more we hear their stories, our appreciation for a very broad-mindedness of these people just increases. I mean, amazing, broad-mindedness to literally accommodate everybody. And he had such concepts also. His concepts were so good. One concept, actually, the last concept, Drishta Drishya concept, that's what he calls it. So he basically says that this is from the 5th chapter of Gita. In 5th chapter of Gita, if you know, Prabhupada had titled it Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Why that title is given? Because in the 5th chapter, there are these verses which say that we are not the doer. Everything the senses are only doing. And the living entity is just an observer. This concept is there in the 5th chapter from 9th verse also. You're breathing, you're walking around. Actually, your body is only doing everything. You're not doing anything. And that is how you should do work in the world, Krishna is saying, Arjuna. Because the modes need engagement as per their nature. So just engage it. And you, as the Atma, just be a witness that my body is a Kshatriya, so it needs this type of engagement. So I have to do it. And that's life. This concept, Saraswati Thakur took it to the next level to say that the body is just an observer. We are actually not the doer, even to such an extent. He would say that darshan of the deity doesn't mean that we are seeing the deity. Deity is seeing us. So that was his concept of darshan. You understood, na? So it is said that once he was taking darshan from a faraway place, he didn't have his specs. So one disciple was getting his specs to give him, so that you can have darshan. So he said, what are you talking? So Saraswati Thakur, he replied to the disciple, Hare, I have come, darshan ho gaya na mera. The Lord has seen me. I am standing in front of him for him to see me. Not that I am going to see him. And he used it to such an extent, even Prasad, so there is a story that one of his fellow was eating, one big Pandit had come to eat Malpua. So one of his disciples asked him, Pandit, are you eating Malpua or is Malpua eating you? That fellow felt insulted. He went home saying that, and he wrote a letter to Saraswati Thakur. I am from a good family. I have a nice wife who cooks nice things. मैं सिर्फ खाने के लिए आया क्या Malpua तुम्हारे यहाँ ऐसे? So Saraswati Thakur actually told him that actually we don't consume the prasad. We allow the prasad to consume us literally, because the point here is Drishta Drishya. This is Krishna in front of us. We have come as a respect in front of Krishna. So if you see these concepts which he had, very original thought, very shastric. So one thing about Saraswati Thakur which he says is, by tradition he was very conservative, shastric, but in terms of accessibility, presentation, extremely modern and appealing. That combination was deadly. And because of that combination, it is said, he actually attracted the Bhadraloka to him. Because most of the Gaudiya Math preaching, at least in those 20 years, were to the top class of Bengal. Top class of Bengal. In fact, it is said all his sannyasi disciples were born Brahmins at that time in Bengal, who had surrendered to him and taken this path, which itself was a very big achievement, because So it is said that he never preached so much to, for the general mass, it was only Kirtan and all that. Very intellectual type of people got attracted to Gaudiya Mata. So that's the history, that's the legacy which, Srila Prabhupada took ahead and did, Anyway, we are just severely timed out, yeah. So, Srila Saraswati Thakur Avirbhav Mahamotsav ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrind ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hare Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna. Let us thank His Grace Krishna Kishore Prabhu for his very wonderful, deep, and enlivening presentation on Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj glories. So let us thank him by once loudly chanting the Hare Krishna Mantra. Hare Sometime we'll organize a seminar for him, 8-hour seminar on Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, another 8 hours on Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He has done a lot of deep research, understanding their presentations and their philosophy and their context in which they did that. So today we have a special offer. We have Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhav book, written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj in 3 volumes set. So this original price is 3,000 rupees, but today on the occasion of appearance day of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is just available for 2,500 rupees. So devotee have put a stall. Where is that devotee? Here is there. So if you want to avail that offer, you can please contact him and take his set. It's very wonderful compilation. Contains all the life and teachings and the life of disciples of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj also. Also, a part of that book is published in Hindi as Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Sankshipt Jivan Charitra. It's a part of that book, but it's available in Hindi also, and it's just 150 rupees, so you can have it and read it today itself. It's not very thick, but it will deepen our appreciation for Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj's teachings and his work. And the further program will continue. 11 o'clock we will have bhajans, and after that 11:30 we'll have a class in Hindi by His Grace Shyam Krishna Prabhu. And at 12:30 we'll have Pushpanjali, followed by the Samsar Davanal prayers and Aarti, and after that we'll have Prasadam for everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.